Alex Tarris here, back for another product review. And if you have any questions about these two products, I've worked with both companies, worked with HOCATT for many years, and then transitioned from them. I am now working with a superior version of this equipment called the Refire, and the company behind that is Innovative Wellness Consultants. Okay, so also if you are looking to pre-order the new model of the Refire, which may be having delivery 2024 September at this point, or you need a promo price, just reach out directly. Or if you reach out directly to the company, just mention my name, Alex Tarris, for special pricing. So let's just get into it. So let's start with the HOCATT here. This was if you've never heard of the HOCATT, it stands for hyperthermia, so it's an acronym. Hyperthermia, ozone, carbonic acid, so that's kind of like CA's carbonic acid, transdermal therapy or transdermal technology. Okay, so let's scroll down. This is what it is. Now this is actually something, I don't know if you're familiar with the superhuman protocol. You can kind of Google that. Superhuman protocol involved like multiple modalities. How it is now is a bit different than how it was. But when it first began, part of this main use of the superhuman protocol incorporated usage of a HOCATT, if you're not familiar with that. So these are two doors that close, and by the way, on this video we will actually be comparing, of course, according to the title of my video, between this HOCATT and the Refire Chamber. So, but I'm going to do this video as if you don't know what this is. So you can adjust the seat height. These are kind of like a steam ozone cabin, if you've ever seen anything like that. We'll tell you what is actually different about this, of course. The steam rises from there, if you were just curious. There's some tubes in here that pump in carbonic acid and ozone, and also your feet here are on a microcurrent, on plates, metal plates, which is where you get the microcurrent from, okay, for some of the microcurrent therapies. And depending on the model that you get, you can't see inside this case here, but basically this is a high intensity PEMF. That stands for pulse electromagnetic frequency. If you have any questions about that, you can just reach out to me directly. My main contact info is below the video, my email. But anyways, one of the main models has a PEMF in the back side here, so it's behind you in the fiberglass when you are seated in here, and you can run it at the same time. And then if you're doing it, or the other option is not getting that model and having the PEMF coils separately and using it separate outside of this HOCATT, okay? So that is one of the main differences, by the way, between the various models. So that's a picture of the loops that I was kind of talking about there, either hardwired inside the chamber or you can use them outside, okay? My very brief, and by the way, yes, there's some big name endorsers of HOCATT technology because it just works so friggin' well. And the PEMF, by the way, came later. HOCATT was out for many years before this PEMF system was created. So the efficacy was already really, really great with the HOCATT itself, okay, before, again, PEMF came out. And I just am pointing out, like, there's a lot of big name practitioners in various specializations that really endorsed and love and utilized the HOCATT. Therefore, as we move to a superior version and brand, which we'll talk about with the Refire, it only takes and builds upon the efficacy that was created with this, okay? So I will just say one brief thing, by the way, about this PEMF. It is kind of basic in its function. PEMF is a very complex category, a lot to talk about. I do have some videos on my channel. I'm not a fan of high intensity spark gap PEMF, okay, for many reasons. Not to mention 95% at least of PEMF research has not been done with this type of PEMF, okay? So all the great benefits that you hear about, that is done with very low intensity fields. And it's not just about field intensity. I wish it was that simple. But there's a lot to know about the waveform itself, the frequencies and harmonics and all kinds of stuff. So let's talk about the modalities that you find in HOCATT. It is in the name. Hyperthermia, if you don't know what that is, That basically means it's not hypothermia, but hyper means you're going to raise your core body temperature, right? You ever hear of a sauna? You ever hear of a hot bath, steam room, etc.? So you can get your temperature up. Okay, why? Because of the steam that's coming out from here, as I said. So when you got this cabinet enclosed, it gets nice and toasty in there. So you do have steam, okay? What do I mean by activated oxygen? Well, it is pumping out ozone, and you do get a couple tanks, CO2 tank, and for making the carbonic acid, right? See that? And then ozone tank, okay? Which does what? Well, to be really precise, when ozone mixes with the steam and hangs around on your skin, by the time the body's really absorbing that, it's technically no longer ozone. It is a compound that is a chemical molecule that's very similar to like peroxide, hydrogen peroxide. So it's a little bit more oxidative and still very, very therapeutic, okay? So I don't want you to confuse like getting 10-pass ozone therapy or an EBU or rectal insufflation of ozone. You know, those are more pure ozone therapies, okay? And the one I left out was Illuma Elite, which is ultraviolet blood irradiation. It's a great technology, and also they run ozone through your blood and hydrogen, and so that's the only other thing if you're doing like UVBI, and then that's another way you can get ozone in your body, or ozonated oil. Although once again, actually, ozonated oil, just to be clear, I know this is going to be educational for people who don't know a lot about ozone, but a lot of people are confused. They get, oh, I'm getting ozonated oil, which is really great, you know, for the body, the oral health, things like that. But by the time you are actually, it's not really like pure ozone that actually makes its way into your body when you put it into the oil. Anyways, that's a tangent. So pure oxygen breathing, what do they mean? They mean that you have a nose cannula. It's just like a little tube that goes in your nose, and you can breathe pure oxygen. Why? Because as you have ozone, steam, ozonated steam, that is here, and you stick your little head out of it. Let's see if we have a photo with somebody's head sticking out of it. Here we go. Yeah. All right. That's funny. Anyways, yeah, so that just helps if there's any ozone coming up through. I really am surprised they don't have a happen thing. Anyways, you get the idea. When you close these cabinet doors, your head sticks out and you look kind of like you're in an iron lung. So there is a little bit of ozone that comes up through that. That's why people, when they have the HOCATT, what they used to do was take a towel and wrap it around your neck just to really prevent any ozone from coming up and irritating your sinuses. And so just to further reduce that irritation, that is why they introduced that nose cannula, sort of blowing pure oxygen into your nose area, if you were wondering. Don't think about this like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get all these amazing oxygen benefits from like breathing a little bit of O2. No, not really. Where you're really going to get more of the activated oxygen experience in your body is when your body absorbs that moisture, steam, mixed with ozone, okay? Now, what comes before in this process, and I'm going into a lot of details here, but I think it's good to build the foundation here of the protocol before we go over into explaining the refire here, okay? So, yeah, so what do you do before the ozone steam and raising your body temperature? Well, the steam pumps out first. It starts to raise your core body temperature, which is important. Starting to get your circulation up a little bit, your heart rate up a little bit. And then what is pumped in is CO2. Now, this is literally like the same stuff that you're making carbonated beverages with. Okay, sodas, whatever. Soda stream. It's just a lot bigger tank. That's all. So what in the first few minutes, and it'll average between 4 to 7 minutes on average, there's little tubes, and that pumps out into the cabin, mixing with the steam, CO2. Why does it say CO2 and say carbonic acid? Are these same things? Yes and no. Carbonic acid is is after CO2 absorbs into the body. It's a gas, right? And then the body actually, as part of the metabolism process, it turns into carbonic acid, okay? And I will just educate you super briefly. Why is that helpful? Because this has to do with every time you breathe, right? So as you breathe in, you're getting nitrogen and mixed with a little bit of oxygen, and there's a few other things, but mainly those gases as you breathe in air, okay? And that's exchanged through respiration. And what do you think comes out? We all know, right? Carbon dioxide, right? And the trees love that. So that whole process, this kind of thing, is always happening in the body. And in fact, there's a whole thing about the balance between acid and alkaline, right? So one of the primary things that actually affects that, especially in the blood, is your breath, your breathing process, your pulmonary system, all that. In fact, that's where you detox a good amount too, through the lungs, and hydrate as well, okay? So there's a whole thing here. So as you take in and you raise your carbonic acid levels in your blood because of this transdermal process, the body will respond and say, oh, okay, well, if I have an increase in carbonic acid in my body, that means I need more oxygen, right? Because it's supposed to maintain a certain ratio of balance. So you literally don't asphyxiate and your cells get enough energy, right? So in that process, how does the body respond? It says, okay, I need to signal the blood, the hemoglobin cells in my bloodstream and my vessels and my arteries and everything to drop the oxygen that they're carrying into tissues, right? Because I don't want to go into hypoxia. What's hypoxia? Hypoxia is I'm running out of oxygen, if you've heard that term. And you're welcome to Google it and whatever. But a lot of people have pseudohypoxia or stages of it for many reasons. And so this is a way of really helping the body to get back a higher level of cellular oxygen, which is very supportive for many reasons. Other modalities can do that, as we said, right? Ozone, hyperbaric, exercise with oxygen training, just improved breathing processes, exercise, regular exercise. Okay, so it drops, as I said, the oxygen, okay, in response to carbonic acid levels raising in the body. So what does that mean? That means that if your blood cells, or hemoglobin, right, is dropping more oxygen, you're getting more oxygen more deeply into your tissues as it releases. Now, obviously, we don't want to just keep dropping oxygen forever, and then you're like, okay, well, I'm just going to asphyxiate now. I really need oxygen, because the rate at which you're now dropping more oxygen, you might not be able to get enough through breath to really catch up. And we also just want to maintain a good pH balance. But really, the main reason this is done is because as you drop more oxygen, which is good for the body, in tissues, your body also vasodilates. That means that all those vessels and arteries and everything, they start to open wider, right? Because they are trying to do what? Increase blood flow and trying to get more oxygen into tissues because it's running out of oxygen, carrying oxygen, okay? And so naturally also, usually as you vasodilate, the breath might increase. It depends on what type of activity you're doing, but anyways. So as you vasodilate a little bit, that actually induces a bit of a parasympathetic response. So your autonomic nervous system, which is sympathetic and parasympathetic, control a lot of things, including your respiratory processes, relaxation, or if you're exercising, or you need more energy, or need less energy, or just need to relax more, your cardiac rate, and a lot of different factors. And also the rate of which you're having this carbon dioxide oxygen exchange. So what do you think is the best time to introduce an oxidative therapy, meaning giving your body some form of oxygen molecules? Okay, and that could be O2, it could be O3. O3, 3 oxygen molecules, is ozone, if you didn't know that. And then there's some in-betweens, like what's hydrogen peroxide and what's all these other type of things. So there's some in-betweens, depending on what their molecular combo is. So what's the best time, right, to introduce an oxidative therapy? Well, it would be after my heart rate was increased a little bit. I had an increase in circulation, which we did from hypothermia. And then we also vasodilated a little bit, right? We said, hey, blood cells, drop some of your oxygen. Why? Well, we want to increase the oxygen in a cellular level as much as we can. And I'm not going to stress you out, body, because after, a few minutes, we're going to switch over from CO2 that's being pumped in here, and we're going to switch over into ozone. Okay, so you're actually literally pumping ozone. There is an ozone generator, if you're wondering. So you are pumping in pretty concentrated high gamma ozone, and it mixes with the steam as we talked about before, right? And then you're transdermally means you're absorbing it through the pores on your skin, okay? And where's that going? Well, it's going into your lymph, which is great, and it's also going into your bloodstream directly. It's a way of going into your bloodstream directly, right? Without necessarily having, so there's all kinds of transdermal things you can rub on your body that end up in your bloodstream, okay? Skin is a very good organ for that. So it's an alternative way to get things into the bloodstream effectively, systemically, and massively. Surface area of your skin is what? Very big, biggest organ, right? So you potentially have a lot of pores, and you can absorb a lot all over the body through this method, okay? So the best time to introduce an oxidative therapy like ozone is when the blood cells are saying, oh my gosh, we're dropping all this oxygen in because carbonic acid levels are increasing. In other words, it's sensing hypoxia. It's saying, oh my gosh, we need to deliver more oxygen to tissues. And then we switch over into a lot of oxygen being delivered. So what do you think? The blood is like, oh my gosh. Yeah, it's really the immune system signaling and saying, okay, blood cells, get ready to soak up and absorb as much oxygen as possible. And so that's exactly then what is introduced. And that is really what so just even those two processes right there are very, very therapeutic for any condition. Oh, I have a cold. Guess what? This is amazing. Oh, I have leukemia. Not making any claims there, but read between the lines. You know, you get the idea. It could be literally anything on any extreme, or I'm just an athlete trying to recover better. I mean, it really just runs the full gamut. Amazing testimonials. Essential oil infusions, let's talk about these other things real quick here. They don't have it on the Refire, which we'll get into. You know, there's different ways you can have a diffuser in your home, although, sidebar comment, depending on how much you use diffusers, you don't want to overuse it. A lot of people are getting too much oil particulate into their lungs. A lot of people don't know that. So I'm talking about diffusers, by the way, not this. So yeah, can you absorb some of these particulate into your skin? Sure. Do you need to do it this way? Well, I'd suggest you just belong to doTERRA and probably just rub essential oils on as needed onto your wrists or onto your body. The absorption transdermally is already good enough. I don't really think this poses any really unique advantage. It's for marketing purposes maybe, but that's about it. Photon color lights, just straight up, these are not really therapeutic, period. When you get into light therapy, chromotherapy, there's a couple different things. One is if it's the type of light spectra that has to do with signaling processes through your brain, nervous system, you know, through the eyes, and again, through certain cells and structures in your brain that are responsive to those spectra. Well, in that scenario, and there's great data and research out there, the light would really have to get into your eyes, obviously, right? For that type of signaling to work in your body. Well, these lights, as you can see, one there, you don't actually see those. They're not visible to you when you got your head out of the cabin, okay? So any of those benefits to certain color spectra that have to do with through the eyes to the brain, you will not receive, okay, through the HOCATT. What about the rest of, you know, what about spectra that basically can benefit your body systemically? So your skin and deeper, okay, internally. Well, when you look at that research, you have to be medical grade diodes. You have to get a certain amount of energy. So you have to have enough intensity of those directly on the skin to really therapeutically make a difference. The way that this is set up, in my personal opinion, you would not be able to receive that, okay? So if you're like, what about red? What about blue? And you get the idea. Not really. It's not really the ideal setup in here. It's really more almost aesthetic. Oh, look at these cool colors. Granted, you're not really going to see the colors. So it's not really aesthetic. I don't really think there's much use the way it's set up. It's not really designed for efficacy with color, with actual specific spectra. You really got to have to send a lot of energy with a bunch of LEDs, directly on the back or directly on your front side, irradiating you, okay? And yeah, microcurrent, there are really good microcurrent programs in here. I will put a link below for a microcurrent device I really like that is actually more sophisticated and more custom in terms of how it reads the body, and it has a lot of different programs. Long story short, basically what I'm saying is to have the programs in here, it is cool, it is nice to have that synergy in it, although, you know, microcurrent therapy is amazing stuff, and I prefer a specific microcurrent device as a standalone. To really maximize the benefits of microcurrent, let's put it this way, you really are going to want to do a couple different sessions per day or more with a standalone device, in my personal opinion. And there is one that's a lot more sophisticated in many reasons than what you get in this. So if you're curious about what that device is, I put it below in the video in the description. As I said before, I'm not a fan of high intensity PEMF for many reasons. I think it's sketchy, number one. There's a lot. We actually really don't know the full safety and actually the consequences, to be honest, about what it might be doing to the body. There's just very, very minimal research. PEMF is awesome of a product category, but most of it is done with low intensity. And yes, I do have a favorite out there that also has like a couple thousand studies. It's so far beyond with the research and patents and everything. There's really like nothing even close to it. So there's one brand. And then just, you know, send me an email if you're like curious on PEMF. So, you know, is it worth the staggeringly costly amount of money that they charge for something with an insane margin that you wouldn't believe? Is it worth it? I don't think so. Again, I'd probably pursue, if you want to have it at your place, I would recommend a far cheaper, much higher efficacy PEMF system. Okay, it's also portable. It's really nice. You can put it in a chair. You can put it anywhere. So let's move on. Yeah, let's move on. Okay, so let's pop over to Refire. All right. So you will see, by the way, if you pop over to this website, there are other modalities, and there actually are more modalities behind this company that are about to be loaded. They're overdue onto this site. So they actually have a larger suite of options that are even like, you know, they don't have necessarily everything on here yet. If you're curious about what those are, just let me know, and I'll tell you the additional equipment. Anyways, they really work with a very, very high-level manufacturer that's kind of very familiar with designing things kind of like this. Now, I just first off want to just state the obvious. It is a lay-down versus seating vertically, so that is one improvement. Why is it an improvement? Because most people have subpar microcirculation, number one. Okay, real subpar. By the time they're 30 or 40, it's crazy. That's number one. These have a lot of things going on. There's a lot of subpar movement of blood around the body, okay? And there's a lot of stuff going on with their cardiac system, and yeah. So if you vasodilate, which again, the system does really well, and you increase the heart rate, and you really get things moving around, you know, it's not the most ideal situation to have somebody seated vertically. So I'm not going to get all technical on you, but there is a difference that the autonomic nervous system, in terms of how it regulates cardiac function, pulmonary, it knows when you're laying down versus for seated vertically, obviously, you know, because otherwise it would be like so difficult for us to literally get up from a laying down position. We would like try to get up in the morning and I like pass out and fall over, like literally, right? So you don't, and we have all gotten up quickly, right? And we're like, oh my gosh, I feel so dizzy, right? Oh my God, my head feels weird, right? So that's a perfect example. Okay, there's a difference in how the body knows to move blood around the body, depending on if you're vertical or you're laying down. Okay, so what we have learned for years with HOCATT is it's not optimal. I'm not going to go into any more details. It's not as optimal to vasodilate, go into hyperthermia, and also highly oxidate, increase oxygen, all that kind of stuff. Drop oxygen initially, right, with the carbonic acid raising. It's not ideal when somebody is seated vertically, okay, versus laying down. And we'll just leave it at that. If you have any more questions, you can always ask me. So this is generally a better way to go, okay, laying down. One interesting thing is there is actually, and you can do this test by the way, on your own with a recommended device I'll put in the description. If you wanted to test like muscle oxygenation, so that means oxygen levels in tissues of your choice. including nitric oxide, which is actually kind of cool. I will put the device below. But you can actually test, and there's been some studies out there with an infrared sauna that was lay down, and you can also test it with something like this. Your body generally will be able to oxygenate tissues like your core organs, which is obviously very beneficial if you're laying down versus seated. I think that's kind of easy to understand. 70% of your microcirculatory system is in your legs. Yeah, it's crazy. So that's like so many miles. It's incredible. So as you know, there's a lot of blood, right? There's a lot of blood and other nutrients down there, right? So you think it's easier to get those nutrients up to your, and circulate around your core organs and your brain and everything if you're laying down or if you're seated vertically? Right, laying down is easier, okay? Also, when we talk about the parasympathetic response, I'm sure you've seen like little speakers here. They have vibroacoustic therapy. When you, and we're going to get into the modalities here, there are several modalities here beyond just the vasodilation effect that induce a parasympathetic response. That's rest, regenerate, relax. Okay, it controls all those different metabolic functions in the body. When you're laying down, this automatically is one way of signaling a parasympathetic effect. Your body's just programmed that way to take naps, to rest, to fall asleep, right? So when you sit vertically, your body is always going to be in a little bit more of a sympathetic tone. So when we deliver modalities therapeutically to the body, we really want to maximize the shift of taking that client or patient or user into parasympathetic mode so you can be the most receptive on an immune system level to utilize these modalities. Like if we're going to be doing light therapy, and we'll keep it simple, it does many things, but it increases your nitric oxide, increases your cellular oxygen, and then improves your ATP and your energy in the mitochondria and all that kind of good stuff, right? As one example. If we really want to help restore the body with that, increase in those photochemical metabolites, we would want the body to be receptive to that, okay? So again, parasympathetic mode. And your body immediately is going to have a better response to these modalities, okay? So when you're so this is an important thing to mention because there's a lot of clinics out there, modalities, or just a lot of places, wellness businesses, they might have a bunch of modalities. But it's always important to make sure you're addressing, ensuring, guaranteeing that you're going to create a strong parasympathetic shift right from the get-go with that client before you offer them additional therapeutics. A lot of people are stuck in sympathetic overdrive and have a lot of other hormonal signaling neuroendocrine issues. So when they're stuck in that sympathetic mode, just a lot of those modalities you might throw at them in general, if they're still stuck in that too much, you're just not going to get nearly the same beneficial outcomes. So that's why, again, people get such great results with something like this, because it really, now we're stacking modalities here that help entrain and shift a person into more of a parasympathetic mode. It's also improving vagal tone, okay, if you're into polyvagal theory and just vagus system resetting and balancing. Vagus is one of the largest nerves in your body. You can Google it, connected with many organs, and plays an active connected role with your autonomic functions, autonomic nervous system, which is what? It is something that is interfacing with your central nervous system, okay? Google's, has plenty of great information on that, or AI search. Let's get into the modalities, and that makes this different than it, and also has some similar overlap of the same modalities, okay? So there are some differences, and there are some things. Okay, so I did double check, and I think the version of the website I'm looking at right now is just missing a couple modalities. Not a big deal. I'll just tell you exactly what those are. So, as we know, transdermal ozone, okay, we talked about that. Carbonic acid, right, pumping in that CO2 gas, mixing with the steam, right? Now, this is a biggie. This alone makes this a game changer because, if you've been following me, I'm obsessed with hydrogen, molecular hydrogen. If you see the term molecular hydrogen, that means water that is enriched with hydrogen, higher hydrogen levels, H2, gas that dissolves into water, and you drink it, and it creates a signaling process in your gut, okay? There's 1,500 amazing studies on it. It's incredible. It helps your body in like every single way. Now, you can drink it. You can also inhale it through a nose cannula. So instead of, again, having to go buy separate hydrogen device out there, you already get it in the system. And remember, this system is modular. So if somebody comes in, they're like, you know, I really want to do vibroacoustic therapy. And by the way, they say sound vibration therapy. Vibroacoustic therapy is really the keyword term. If you're wanting to look into decades of research, that's really the best search term, vibroacoustic therapy. Okay. So when you say, oh, you know, I just want to like chillax and just do a little hydrogen inhalation and a little vibroacoustic session. Okay. Because I'm doing X, Y, and Z, and I only have X amount of time. No problem. On the control panel, you select this, you select that, and you charge them accordingly, and you're done. How cool is that? So you can, and because everything is modular, the other really nice thing is it makes, if you ever had to do any repairs or troubleshooting, and you're like, for some reason, like, you know, one aspect of this is not working well, it is a heck of a lot easier to troubleshoot and also fix. Because again, these are like modular additions in here, at least the way they're set up and wired and everything. So you don't have to like, it's not some major ordeal like, oh my God, I got to ship this whole thing back into the company, and there's nothing like that. And a lot of things, it can be troubleshooted over the phone, just directly to you, and without the involvement of a technician, which is nice. And sometimes you do. But you know, it's not a common thing, but I'm just pointing out they designed this thing well for, you know, those types of situations to be really a smooth process. That's a tangent. Let's back to the modalities. Hydrogen inhalation, already on there. Hydrogen alone will improve any other modality. You always want to have it at your clinic or at your house. And every time you're inhaling, it's going into your lungs here and just going into your bloodstream and just going absolutely everywhere as needed. And even after you stop and you finish your session, say you're doing a 20-minute session or 30-minute, whatever, after you stop, cool thing about hydrogen is it's signaling. It's a signaling gas, gasotransmitter, which is a really cutting-edge modality. Look up gasotransmitters and research. The signaling effect lasts 3 to 4 hours after you finish doing the modality. Pretty cool, right? Acoustic light wave. A little bit to explain, but it's basically using a plasma tube. If you guys ever heard of Rife technology, so it's a plasma tube that is able to create frequencies that are in like the radio, it's like megahertz range. Very high, very fast. Radio megahertz range. And so inside of this, where does this go? That plasma tube, a couple of them, it's like literally inside the curved portion, like directly in front of your entire body. So it's within close proximity. So your whole body gets exposed, which is really important when you're working with a plasma tube. And then you can run through it, through the control panel, all kinds of frequencies. It's a lot to explain. It's very cool, very cutting edge. So yeah, there's just a lot of things you can do. But for sure, yeah, if you want to target like a pathogenic systemic issue in the person, one of the better ways to really come closer, anyways, to a guarantee, I remember I said come closer, to really knowing or believing that you're fully systemically clearing something from the body, because remember, pathogens, they can hide out anywhere. You have so much space inside your body, it's like sending a rocket into space. There's like so much space. It's like 99% space, right? Because we're getting into the micro world of your body, okay? So that's the tricky thing about pathogens. And they can hide out. Also, in a lot of areas, your immune system has trouble reaching, and there is no blood supply. Uh-oh, what are you going to do, right? That's why people keep having chronic things come back. And really one of the best ways is frequency-based therapies, things that irradiate the body. Irradiation, or radiation, meaning light, or electromagnetic spectra. Okay, so in the case of plasma tube creating those fields, you can send a frequency everywhere into the body at the same time. So there's a huge advantage there. Now, if you really want to take on pathogenic infection, would that be like the only thing you do? Some people do, right? They just pursue frequency, and it's a long conversation. A lot of people don't succeed. But the best way to really increase the best outcomes is stacking multiple modalities that support the immune system and or are anti-parasitic or antimicrobial or just, you know, antipathogenic at the same time, okay, or one after the other. Now, ideally, for certain things like what I'm talking about, you kind of want to do, if you can, modalities at the exact same time. Of course, the only way to do something like multiple things at the same time is a refire chamber, okay? Because otherwise, you have separate things, right? Separate equipment that you have to do one thing after another, which takes up more space, right? In your building, in your office, in your room, takes up more space if you have multiple equipment, and takes up more time. Suddenly it's 1 to 2 hours. Do you think your average person has 1 to 2 hours? Okay, maybe if they're so sick they're not working, right? And they're just like, I just taking care of myself all day. But that's not like the majority of your clients, unless it is. But either way, you get the idea. You can turn over the room a lot faster. You can reach way more people, treat way more people. That's why the ROI on something like this is so high. Okay, it's a high price, but it can become a very big moneymaker because you can treat so many people in a short space of time, and so you can really just like book this out, back to back to back to back to back. Okay. And you're not like having to manage like all this different equipment and like need like assistants and staff and oh my gosh, it's like a whole thing, right? And this is really attendance free. You set it and you walk away, unless somebody's like really out of it and super sick. Maybe you might want to stay in the room, right? But otherwise you just like set it on, you do your control panel, you walk away, you come back 20 minutes later or whatever it is, and then you're good. You help them get out, and that's all there is to it, right? So it's great. It really won't take up a lot of your extra time. So vibroacoustic therapy also in here. A lot of great research, as I said, now several decades. Vibroacoustic therapy has been around, and those are those little speaker thingies. You can watch the little fun video, okay, that are behind you in your back. And so there's a lot of transducers, okay, transducer speakers that are built in. So it's really, really good vibroacoustic therapy. Traveling PEMF, what does that mean, right? So it was actually the Russians. PEMF research has been around decades, by the way, and there's, they say maybe like 10,000 studies, and it's probably about right. Anyway, it's been around a while. Russia actually came up with the concept of traveling PEMF, which means what? Well, if you have multiple coils, and there's a lot of coils behind you in this, also in there, that you lay on. And remember, everything is under a mat, everything's waterproof, just FYI, it's easy to clean, easy to wipe down. But the multiple coils means that one coil pulses, another coil pulses, another coil pulses in a certain sequence. And that sequence varies, which keeps the body guessing. It doesn't know where the next magnetic pulse or frequency is coming from. The reason that is done is because that's one of the best ways to prevent the brain from adapting to a certain frequency rhythm. Because when it starts to adapt, it starts to ignore a signal. That was always the challenge with PEMF. How do you get the body to stop ignoring something after a few minutes or after a few days? Just, it all depended. And one was traveling, so it's moving it. And that's not the only thing this PEMF does, and it's definitely a little bit more sophisticated in terms of its programs, but we can always chat about that. Anyway, something totally custom built for this system. And PEMF does many, many, many different things, and it's very synergistic. It would just take so much to explain the synergism between like oxidative therapy and PEMF, or light wave therapy and PEMF, and you get the idea. But it is something that systemically will affect every single part of your body. That's another reason PEMF can be very powerful, because everything works together. Your immune system has to modulate every single process in your body. So, if you, it's just kind of like common sense. Well, a modality would have a greater chance of having a total systemic effect and a better outcome if I could affect everything at the same time, because that's literally how my body works all the time. It's never like, it doesn't just like address one thing and not keep track of everything else at the same time. So PEMF can send a wave, an electromagnetic wave that goes completely through your body and touches every single cell, every single structure, every single bacteria, you name it. Okay. Quantum frequencies, that goes back to what's possible to send through the acoustic light wave. So think about that plasma tube as the transmission, or like the antenna. It's like a transmission way of sending frequencies, and what you send through that, that's a little bit to explain. Quantum is kind of a generic term, but from the standpoint that it is affecting the signaling, like the wave frequencies that signal molecules that affect every metabolic process in the body. It's a more primary way versus like taking an herb, let's just say, to keep it simple, okay, or eating food or whatever, okay. Let's move on. Transdermal nanoparticulate. So there's a very unique type of homeopathic line that's developed here for delivery transdermally through the pores of the skin. This is literally the only, yeah, it was, and we can go into that. So there's different formulas that are misted into the steam, and your body can absorb them at the end of all the modalities. So it's like a more systemic way of working with certain compounds. It could be like an herbal compound. It just depends on what the person needs. Okay, we already talked about steam. What else is it missing? It is missing infrared therapy, infrared spectra. You can read up on infrared if you're not familiar with it. It has a million benefits. And red light therapy. Okay, red light, between red light and near infrared spectra, there's a little over 5,000 studies. It's also called photobiomodulation therapy. Okay, so it's heavily endorsed and used even in FDA-cleared medical devices. If you're not familiar with this modality, it is amazing. It does a million things for you systemically. So again, that type of light therapy, it is in here. It is intense enough to actually give you photochemical, cellular, metabolic effects, benefits. Okay, so that is also in here. Okay, so those are medical grade LED diodes that are inside of this. So no, you do not have to go purchase a separate standalone light bed, if you've ever seen those, light bed or LED light bed. That said, if you do want to purchase one, you can always reach out to me. I have reviewed, I've worked with many companies. I've looked into the light bed category for over 8 years. So I know a lot about that category. It is a heck of a category to discern. Anyways, so those are the modalities, and then the additional couple that I just mentioned that aren't in this list, okay? And no, you don't see microcurrent therapy on here, if you were wondering, okay? Because transmitting through a plasma tube at higher frequency oscillations is a superior delivery of, let's just call it specific, like frequency specific treatments or protocols or modalities, okay? It's just a better way of delivering to the body, right? So that is one reason why they decided to let go of, or not do frequency transmission through plates, metal plates or electrodes on the body. I think that's it. There it is. Doesn't that look nice? So what do you need for a space like this? Ideally, you want to have a room that's about 12 by 12 or 12 by 10. And this is, as you can see, a separate standalone control panel. It also comes with a CO2 tank, oxygen tank, or oxygen concentrator, depending. They come with the system. So you have to count for that space, okay? But if you have a room or space like the dimensions I just told you, then it should fit just fine. The system itself comes in 3 parts. It's delivered in 3 parts. So it's very easy to manage. Okay, it's not going to be like some super heavy monstrosity and you're like, so there's a whole like struggle to get it into where you need, and it's actually very easy to get into wherever you need to get into. And will it fit through your average door size? Yes, it will. Okay, 3 different parts. And yes, for one of the larger parts, you will carry it sideways. And you'll have no problem getting it through your standard door frame. It's a common question. Obviously, people always wonder, right? And that's about it. So if you have any questions in this long video about this modality, and again, how it compares to the HOCATT, or if it's the right place, it's the right type of modality for your facility. I do consultations all the time at no cost. I do also sell equipment, as I said. So just feel free to reach out. You can find my direct contact info below, my email. Please put a thumbs up, on this video if you enjoy it, you find it educational, and you're welcome to subscribe as well. And thanks for hanging in there. Appreciate you.